Welcome to the San Gorgonio Chapter Trail Talk series. My name is John St. Clair, and I will be your Zoom host tonight. And I think maybe I should put myself on Spotlight. There we go. I'm going to go over some of the ground rules for our Zoom session. First of all, unless you're one of the speakers or committee members, you should be muted. And so please do that if you haven't already muted yourself. And if you have questions during the presentation, what we would like you to do is to write your questions in the chat box down at the bottom of your screen. You should have a little talking bubble icon. Click on that, opens up a box, and the default is to chat to everyone. Just leave it that way and type in your questions so you don't forget them. And we'll make sure all questions that are put in the chat box get answered eventually. We will monitor that during the presentation. And I want to remind people that Trail Talk started during COVID when we couldn't hike, but we are hiking now, and summer is a good time to hike. So if you are so inclined, make sure you check out the outings and events section of our webpage and sign up for a hike. Also, all Trail Talk presentations are recorded and posted on the San Gorgonio Chapter YouTube channel. And if you registered before 4 p.m., you should have gotten a reminder email from me. And in that email is the link to the YouTube channel. But if you can't find that, just email me, John St. Clair, and I will be glad to send you the link to the San Gorgonio Chapter YouTube channel. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce Julianne Anderson, who is one of our committee members and the Trail Talk Committee. And Julianne also happens to be co-outings chair for the San Gorgonio chapter and an outings leader as well. And Julianne will, she will introduce our speaker. So Julianne, take it away.
Oh, thank you, John. And good evening, everyone. Many thanks to John for all of his hard work and for laying out ground rules and introducing us in the committee. Carla Kellums is the third committee member, and she's also present. Before I introduce our guest, which is really an honor to have, Cassie McDuff, long-term journalist, highly respected, and we are very, very lucky to have her. I do want to say our car camps are underway for the season. I'm in my car just coming home from Sequoia from our first car camp, and I have a lot to say about that. We will talk about it at a trail talk later this season about the impact of the fires. But just to give a plug, we will have car camps all through the monthly, all through the season. The next car camp will be in August to the ancient bristlecone pine forest at Grandview Campground, which is absolutely gorgeous with a view of the Eastern Sierra for 150 miles of the range and easy access to the ancient bristlecone pines. And I do want to let you know, because I'm such an enthusiast about California, not only do we have the biggest trees in the world, which I just saw the last couple of days, the giant sequoias, we also have the oldest trees in the world, which we're going to see next month, the ancient bristlecone pines, and the tallest trees in the world, the Pacific redwood. And of course, we have near us the highest point in the upper 48 states, Mount Whitney, and the lowest point, which is Badwater Basin in Death Valley National Park. So we are a state of superlatives, and it's good to go out and see these things. So we will be seeing the ancient bristlecones next month. We will be seeing the Eastern Sierra at the beautiful Rock Creek Canyon area at French Camp in September, which is a lovely time to go there. And then we'll be transitioning to Joshua Tree in October. And you can find that, as John mentioned, on our website at the Outings and Events tab. The winter hikes will be, car camps will be at Death Valley, the Mojave National Preserve, and Anza Borrego, and those will be listed presently for the early winter months. Now I would like to have us focus on our wonderful trail talk for July, the IE Campaign Trail 2024. As we all know, the campaign is heating up hugely, and we have a special guest who can help inform us about what is going on in the inland, federally, at the state level, and locally in both of our counties, Riverside and San Bernardino. So I'd like to introduce long-term Inland Empire journalist Cassie McDuff. Cassie is a retired journalist who wrote a Metro column for the Press Enterprise for 17 years, and before that wrote for the San Bernardino Sun for 13 years. She continues to provide a weekly roundup of Inland Empire news for local NPR affiliate 91.9 KVCR News. I listen to it every Friday. It is wonderful. I highly recommend it. Cassie is a native Californian. She attended San Jose State University, majoring in journalism and political science, graduating with highest honors. Since retiring, she has served on several nonprofit boards, currently vice chair of the Board of Commissioners of the Housing Authority of the County of San Bernardino and of the Redlands Traffic and Parking Commission, and also serves on the board of the Community Action Fund of Planned Parenthood of Orange and San Bernardino counties. In addition, she chairs the Public Policy Committee of the American Association of University Women, Redlands Branch. So without further ado, I do want to welcome our special guest, journalist Cassie McDuff. So everyone, welcome with aplomb. And I do want to pose the first question because we are going to, as a committee, be having a discussion, panel style, with Cassie. And Cassie, thank you for coming. Can you?
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So wonderful. Can you start off with describing what is happening in the various federal races, the congressional races in the Riverside, San Bernardino area?
Yes, of course. But first, Julianne, I want to apologize to your members that I'm joining you by phone. I've had an outage of my Wi-Fi at my home. I thought for sure Frontier Communications would have it restored by now. I think we're in day 11. So I'm sorry that I can't see you and you can't see me. I'm just a disembodied voice tonight. But yeah, let me talk about the congressional races. I'm going to kind of go through, the most interesting ones. We'll talk about them all just a little bit. But first of all, the interesting thing to me is there's a couple of rematches from 2 years ago. Up in the high desert and mountains of San Bernardino County, Jay Obernolte, the Republican incumbent, is facing Derek Marshall, a Democrat. It looks kind of like a lopsided race if you look at the primary results. Obernolte had a little over 63% of the vote. So that's a tough one, very Republican district. Down in Corona area, the 40th Congressional District, longtime incumbent Ken Calvert, he's known as the Dean of the California delegation because he's been in office longer than any other member of Congress, Republican or Democrat. I think he's in his 16th, 17th term. He's going to be facing Will Rollins again. And that one was, Calvert has been kind of squeaking by in the last few years, although the recent couple of re-elections, he's done better. A Democrat almost took him out, 4 terms ago. So Will Rollins, he's a Democrat out there in the low desert, Coachella Valley. So we'll see what happens with those two. The other races, they're all Democratic incumbents. Raul Ruiz out in the Coachella Valley is facing a Republican named Ian Weeks. I think Ruiz got 45% in the primary. He had 3 Republicans, 1 Democrat, and 1 no party preference challenger. So he always seems to attract a lot of challengers. Now in the 33rd Congressional District, Pete Aguilar, the Democratic incumbent, is also very high up in the Democratic House leadership. I think he's the number 3 elected party leader in the House. He faces, pardon me, a Republican named Tom Herman. And in the primary, Aguilar got 57% of the vote against the same Republican. So we'll see if that holds up in the November general election. Out in the west end of San Bernardino County, as well as Pomona, which is in LA County, the 35th district, Norma Torres is the Democratic incumbent. She had two Republican challengers. The one that is going to be facing her is named Mike Cargill. And again, Torres always seems to attract, she also had a Democratic challenger. So unlike Jay Obernolte up in the high desert, the other incumbents seem to have tougher races. And finally, Mark Takano in Riverside, the Democratic incumbent, he is facing David Sherpa, Republican. So those are the congressional races. Would you like me to go on to the state offices?
Absolutely. A couple of questions have come in about the federal, but we'll take those in a moment. Let's talk about the state races.
Great. So in the state Senate, this is a real interesting one. Two female candidates, Rosalicia Ochoa Bogue, the Republican. By the way, this district is Yucaipa out, through the Manning Pass to the low desert. And then the Democratic challenger is Lisa Middleton. So that one could be, that is an interesting race. No matter who wins it, it'll be a female incumbent next time. In the 29th district, that's an open seat, redistricted. It goes from San Bernardino through Grand Terrace, Loma Linda, and part of Redlands. Eloise Gomez Reyes, the Democrat, she was the Assembly Majority Leader back session before this. She is facing a Republican named Carlos A. Garcia. So that will be an interesting one. Eloise Gomez Reyes certainly has the name recognition, and so we'll see how that serves her in this runoff. In the 31st State Senate District, and that's the Eastvale, Jurupa Valley, a little bit of Riverside, Sabrina Cervantes, a Democrat who has been in the state assembly, is running to move up to the state Senate. She's facing a Republican named Cynthia Navarro, another woman versus woman runoff. There was another Democrat who sought that seat. His last name is Farouk. He got almost 15% of the vote. So if all of those 15% go to Cervantes, that will put her over the 50% plus one needed to get the seat. Now, in the state assembly races, in the 36th district, and that's eastern Riverside County out, by Blythe and the Colorado River, as well as Imperial County, Jeff Gonzalez, a Republican, is facing Joey Acuna Jr., a Democrat. In the 45th district, this is incumbent James Ramos, very well known, San Bernardino, Highland, Redlands area. He was unopposed in the primary, but somebody did run a write-in campaign, a Republican named Scott Olson. So there will be a Republican on the ballot in the general election, but write-ins are tough campaigns. Ramos got 99% of the vote to the 1% of write-in voters. Out in the low desert, this is another rematch. Greg Wallace is a Republican incumbent. He faces Democrat Christy Holstage again. There was a very close race last time. It's pretty darn close this time. We'll see, if the two parties pour a bunch of money into this race to try to get their candidate over the top. In the 50th Assembly District, this is the one where Eloise Reyes has been the incumbent. So this is an open seat. The two top vote getters are both Democrats. So no matter who gets elected, it'll be a Democrat, Robert Garcia and Adam Perez. This area covered is Rancho through Fontana, San Bernardino, Loma Linda, a little bit of Redlands. In the 53rd Assembly District, and this area is the West End as well as Pomona, so Ontario, Chino, Pomona, a Republican named Nick Wilson will face Michelle Rodriguez, a Democrat. I can't tell you anything about Michelle Rodriguez, but the incumbent is Freddie Rodriguez, and we'll see if that name similarity gets her any advantage at all there. Don't know. In the 58th Assembly District, which is Riverside, Leticia Castillo, a Republican, is facing Clarissa Cervantes. Clarissa Cervantes is a Riverside councilwoman. In the primary, she faced a fellow Riverside council member, Ronaldo Fierro, and she edged him out by a 0.5 percentage point. So that was very close. But again, if all of Fierro's voters go to Cervantes, that could put over the top of 50% plus one. In the 60th Assembly District, which is the Moreno Valley area, Corey Jackson, a Democrat, is the incumbent. He faces Ron Edwards, a Republican. And in the 63rd Assembly District, which is Eastvale, Harupa Valley area, Billy Saley, the Republican incumbent, faces Craig Schultz, a Democrat. So those are your state legislature races. Now, you also asked me to talk about the local races. So if it's all right with you, why don't we start with the county supervisors races?
Before we do that, we have had some questions come in. I think it would be good to address them about the federal and the state
Sure.
juncture.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's see.
Plus a comment, the thing about Rodriguez, Freddie Rodriguez's wife is running to take his seat because he termed out.
Very interesting.
Well, I wasn't sure if that was the wife, because I showed on the records that his name ends with a Z and hers ends with an S, but that could be a typo on one or the other of those. So if that's the wife, that could be, and that would certainly give her an advantage.
I'm pretty sure that is true. And we have a comment from Marianne Reese, who is our chapter chair, who lives in Chino, and she said she is his wife.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so that's confirmatory. Getting back to the federal races, how is the Rollins Calvert race compared to 2 years ago, Cassie?
Well, it looks to me like Calvert has gained a little strength, and of course he was serving in a Republican majority House this time. In the primary, he got 53%. It's not a comfortable landslide advantage. Rollins had another Democrat in that race. Rollins got 38.4%. The other Democrat got 8.6%. So even if you add those, it's a tough race. It's a tough race for a Democrat newcomer going up against a very long-term, well-known incumbent who's been reelected over and over.
Right. Okay. So looking a little more Republican perhaps this time around. Is the Rollins Calvert race, is that the most highly contested congressional race in the region?
Yes, I would say so. Yes.
Okay. That's important for us to know. And here's another comment. Can you tell us more about the Sabrina Cervantes race and the Clarissa Cervantes race? What are some of the issues in each?
Well, let's see. Sabrina Cervantes, it's not an incumbent's advantage, but she has the advantage of being a state legislator. If you're asking me to handicap that one, I would say she's got a good chance. It's not a landslide margin, but like I said, the other Democrat on the ballot in the primary got almost 15%. If all of those go to her, yeah, that's a comfortable advantage. And the area I think is increasingly Democratic in Riverside, at least, although Eastvale and Harupa, as I mentioned, the incumbent assemblyman is a Republican, and he had a very decisive win over his in the primary. As far as the issues, I think they're probably very typical, very typical Democrat versus Republican issues. I think with people who vote based on environmental concerns, very often it's a Democratic candidate who aligns most closely with their concerns. Although even Democrats don't always see eye to eye. We'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the warehouse issue.
Right.
Yeah.
And what about some of the issues in the Clarissa Cervantes race? How
Yeah.
is DUI impacting it?
I'm sorry, how is what? Oh, her
How is her-
DUI? Yeah. I don't know if that made it tougher for her in the primary, but remember the primary was so close. I mean, it was many days after the election before anybody felt comfortable declaring who was the winner. I would totally expect her Republican opponent to bring that up. Do people, are the voters unforgiving about that kind of issue? I don't think so. But who knows? Again, I would expect the party to be more decisive than the DUI.
Interesting.
So I've been asked to make a statement here by our leader. So just for the group to know, Sierra Club is a nonpartisan organization, and we make our endorsements based on the on environmental and social justice platforms of the candidates, and we don't always endorse a candidate in a race. And we have a big process we go through where candidates submit a filled out form and we interview them. And if we think they align with environmental protection, then we sometimes do endorse them, subject to approval by, I believe, by the state. So we are a nonpartisan organization.
Yes.
Yeah, and for the purposes of my talk, I'm not trying to tell anybody how to vote. My hope is just people will get out there and vote.
Right.
Final question on the federal. What are some of the issues in the Coachella race involving Raul Reese and Congressman Reese and his opponent?
I really can't tell you. I know from following Ruiz as an incumbent congressman, I know what issues are top of mind for him. Health issues. He's a doctor, and also fair treatment for veterans, especially those who've been exposed to burn pits. That's been a big issue for him. As far as his opponent, I really don't know.
Okay. Have you been hearing much about Salton Sea issues or lithium mining, and also the health issues about blowing particle dust, or the proposed Chuckwalla National Monument?
No, I mean, certainly I've heard about both of those. I don't follow them closely. The Salton Sea issue, I mean, various agencies have been trying to tackle that for decades now. A lot of federal money has been sought, and a good amount has been allocated as far as getting all the various agencies in agreement as to what the approach should be. Let it dry up, open it up to mining, geothermal, getting all those agencies to agree on how and what and who gets to benefit, that's a real tough one.
I think that's it for our federal questions, and, and the state ones as well. How about, as you were going to begin talking about some of the Board of Supervisors races on the local end of things?
There is
Yeah, sure.
there is
Go
one
ahead.
comment. It wasn't a question, but Mike McCarthy commented, the bristlecone pines are the oldest individual trees, but clonal trees are older. The Yurupa oak is 13,000 years old in Yurupa Valley.
Yes, which is very interesting in terms of the politics of development out there in Harupa. Cassie, what have you heard about that? It's a fascinating story.
Yeah, there have been stories both in the Southern California News Group newspapers and also in the Los Angeles Times. So it's attracting a lot of attention. I know the developer has promised to protect it. I think that, people are concerned whether a wide enough perimeter will be left around that tree to permit its survival. So I would expect, I would expect that to be a big issue as it goes through the permitting process and the planning process.
Well, that is an important issue, certainly to Harupa Valley and the whole county of Riverside and the region. Can you also talk about some of the other issues with both the San Bernardino and Riverside County Board of Supervisors races?
Yeah, so the interesting thing to me about these, the county and city races is they can be decided in the primary, and quite a few of them were. The County Board of Supervisors in San Bernardino County, there were 3 seats on the ballot, the High Desert, the East Valley, and San Bernardino Central. The incumbents in all 3 races were reelected in the primary. Paul Cook up in the High Desert, Don Rao in the East Valley, out to Yucca Valley, 29 Palms. They each won in the primary. Joe Baca was unopposed, so he was reelected in the primary. So you won't see any of those on the ballot in November. In Riverside County, there were 2 offices on the ballot. Chuck Washington down in the Temecula-Murrieta area was reelected in the primary. In Riverside, Central Riverside, the open seat, Kevin Jeffries did not run for reelection. And I think there were 4 candidates seeking that seat. And the runoff is going to feature 2 state legislators, Richard Roth, who has been the state senator in that area, and Jose Medina, the state assemblyman in that area. So that's one to watch. I mean, you don't often see Democrats pitted against each other. It is a nonpartisan office, so, you could say that doesn't matter. But again, I think people look to party affiliation to tell something about where the candidates stand on the issues that matter to them. So that'll be a real interesting one. And, I think they've both been very effective legislators up in Sacramento, but now one of them is going to be coming home to serve on the Board of Supervisors. As far as the other races, we don't really know who the candidates are at this point. The filing period just opened on Monday. It runs through August 9th. So who the candidates will be, we don't know. Oh, and by the way, if no incumbent decides to run, that filing period is extended to August 14th. Oh, and if somebody wants to be a write-in candidate, they have until October 22nd to declare. So I'll just name some of the races. Of course, the 2 biggest cities in the primary, in Riverside City, all of the candidates got 50% plus 1, so there are no runoffs in city. In San Bernardino, only 1 incumbent was reelected, Juan Figueroa. 3 incumbents were ousted in the primary: Ben Reynoso, Kimberly Calvin, and Damon Alexander. Calvin had to run as a write-in candidate because her team failed to collect enough signatures to qualify her for the ballot. for an incumbent, that's an embarrassment. So in San Bernardino, there will be runoffs. I anticipate very closely contested election in Northeast San Bernardino, and that features Treasurer Ortiz, a longtime council watcher and critic, and she'll be running against the former longtime city attorney, Jim Penman, who's also been a council critic. So that I expect a very hot race there. In the 5th Ward in Northwest San Bernardino, a former councilman, Henry Nickel, is going to be facing a newcomer, Kim Knaus. So one person who ran for the 6th Ward, Mario Flores, won in the primary. He had been endorsed by the mayor. In Redlands, there are 2 seats up. Eddie Tejeda and Jenna Guzman Lopez are running for re-election. Don't know who's going to be challenging them, but the word on the street is they're both going to have challengers. In Colton, Fontana, and Rancho Cucamonga, there are 2 seats on the ballot. Yucaipa and Victorville, 3 each. In Rialto, the mayor's office and 1 council seat are going to be on the ballot. So again, we won't know who is running in those offices for a little while yet, till mid-month, next month, I anticipate. The school boards are attracting more attention than they have in the past because of all the turmoil in Temecula Valley Unified and Chino Valley Unified, where there's been a very contentious issue as to whether parents should be notified by the schools if their child asks to be known by a name that doesn't conform with the gender on their birth certificate. That has a lot of very passionate feelings on both sides of the issue. I've heard that in Redlands, the 3 seats, that there is a church-affiliated group that has a slate of 3 people running for those 3 seats. And that's really how the issues came to the fore in Temecula Valley. There was a slate of 3 candidates who were put up by a church-affiliated political action committee, and all 3 won. Now, one of them has since been recalled, but he said he may run for re-election in November. So a really hot issue. And in the San Bernardino Community College District, there are 4 seats up. Although interestingly, 2 seats became open by resignations of the incumbents recently. In one case, the board appointed a successor, and then a month later, they kind of stalled on whether to appoint or leave it open until the next possible election. So who knows what will happen there.
2 comments.
Go ahead.
Racism. First comment about the Harupa Oak, that our chapter of the Sierra Club, we're part of a large coalition, the Sierra Club per se, part of a large coalition of organizations advocating for the oak. So I think that's important for us to all know about our organization. Secondly, what are some of the issues in the Medina Roth supervisorial race in Riverside County, Cassie?
I haven't been able to suss that out yet because, their first job was to make it into the runoff. And so I don't think I'm not aware of them taking pot shots at each other in the primary. So now that they're in the runoff against each other, I don't know, because as I said, they've both been well-respected state legislators. Yeah. As far as issues, I can tell you that for Jose Medina, he has been an educator, and education has been a primary issue for him in the state legislature. How that would translate on a board of supervisors, which does not have jurisdiction over schools, I don't know.
We'll see how that all works out. And I know that Medina has spoken out about Chad Bianco, the rather controversial sheriff of Riverside County. Has that issue surfaced in a large way per your contacts?
Well, it could, especially because Bianco, seems to be running perhaps for governor, not this year, but future. Um, the voters had a chance to kick him out, and he was reelected. I think that was just 2022. The Board of Supervisors was asked to, more closely supervise him, and they said no thanks. So yeah, certainly Jose Medina could raise that as an issue or differentiate himself from Richard Roth that way. I have not heard where Roth has gone public on that issue.
Can you next tell us what are you hearing from your contacts and some of your reporting about warehouse issues in both counties?
Yeah, so just from somebody who's followed these issues, really since I was writing for the newspaper, but also since then, because it's a continual issue in the Inland Empire. More warehouses are getting built. More people are upset about them. I think it's kind of built over the years as people recognize the effects they would have on the quality of life, in terms of air quality and traffic and wear and tear on the roads. I think that's a bigger and bigger issue in our area. And I think from what I have seen and reported on for my news rep on KVCR, more city councils are understanding that their constituents really care about this issue and, don't want warehouses to cover every square inch of the Inland Valley. So, I definitely see that happening. I maybe don't see quite as much impact. Boards of supervisors, I think they are still permitting, those that come before them. However, it was interesting to me that the March Joint Powers Authority, the at March Area Reserve Base, had a controversial project in front of them just a couple of weeks ago. And this is a project of Lewis Corporation, Lewis Company, very well-known developer, mostly in the west end of San Bernardino County, but now kind of branching out. And by the way, their developments have mostly been residential and retail. But now they had this big warehouse project proposed outside of March Air Reserve Base. And it drew out lots of opposition. I understand 75 people signed up to speak during public comment when this was before the March Joint Powers Commission, and most of them opposing. And the board, they didn't reject the proposal, but they tabled the matter. And tabling it is a little different than denying. It just kind of puts it down the road. So, from where I sit, it looks like the developer could either say, "Oh, now I understand the neighborhood opposition. Let me retool my project proposal and come back with something different," or bring back a revised proposal for warehouses, or and risk the JPA again saying no, or saying no or denying it rather than just tabling it. So that's an interesting development there. When I looked at that proposal and read the opponent's remarks, all I could think of was that interchange there at the 215 91 60. Sorry, beg your pardon, the 60 and 215. And I just know how much traffic there is there all the time. Doesn't seem to matter what time of day. And if they do go ahead and put more big rigs on the road with more warehouses, that's going to impact that even worse from what from where I sit.
From your reporting. Yeah,
Mm.
huge issues in Riverside County and also, of course, San Bernardino County as well.
Julianne,
Yes.
can I have a direct response or just question on the, or not question, but the comment on the March Air Force Base? We have the expert here that led the opposition on our call to the March Air Force Base and many other projects. Mike, I don't know if you, I don't want to put him on the spot, but I wanted to make sure we recognize that we have the expert with us, and maybe he has any updates or any thoughts on that March Air Force Base issue.
Mike?
Well, it's not dead, but they did remove it from the calendar. So they have to, the commission has to vote to bring it back as opposed to it just automatically coming back. So they have to get canvassed by staff at the JPA to bring it back. And we're not sure whether that'll happen or not. And the other key factor about that particular agency is it's going away in a year. It's going to be subsumed into the county of Riverside. It's being disincorporated. It's no longer a land use authority in, well, July 1st, 2025. So if they delay too long, it can't happen, or it'll happen from the county. And so it's a really strange project.
So Mike,
Yeah, I appreciate that insight. Is this Michael McCarthy?
That's me.
Great. So are you the researcher who did the work on warehouses adjacent to schools?
Yes.
Great. Well, I was going to mention that because, you know, that study was very relevant to the next thing I want to talk about, which is the two Democrats in the state assembly who both had measures that would mandate some sort of setback from between warehouses and sensitive uses like schools. Eloise Reyes had a bill that would have mandated 1,000-foot distance. James Ramos had one that would have been a much more modest 300-foot distance, but neither of those seemed to gain enough traction in the legislature to knock one or the other out. And I think that might be because, you know, perhaps the rest of the legislature doesn't understand the impact of warehouses because they don't live with it like we do out here in the Inland Empire. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. I mean, so Marianne probably knows at least as much as I do on the politics side at the state level. So I don't know if you want to take this one, Marianne.
Well, I can take a little bit on the yeah, we were behind AB 1000, which was the 1,000-foot setback, and we were not. It's Sierra Club, California, just so you know, we have a statewide presence at the Capitol, and they take positions on bills. And Sierra Club, California took a position that AB 1000, we were in favor of that, but it became yeah, both bills were just died in the legislature, and the I'm trying to think of who it was, if it was the speaker or somebody. Sorry, but I can't think of it right now. But
it was Rivas.
It was Rivas. Okay, so it was turned into
speaker.
A working group. They made a working group to of various people to try to figure out the warehouse issue, and what they're going to do, I have no idea. You know, the Attorney General has a whole. He weighs in occasionally on warehouse developments, but
yeah,
we got no traction with the report, with the Region in Crisis report, with anybody at the state level. So, yeah.
Do you think that was because? I mean, the other reason I could think of is that you know, the Democratic majority in the state legislature didn't want to take sides between two Democrats from the same geographic area.
I don't think so, because Eloise had introduced the bill 2 other sessions before this last session. We had AB 1000 was in the previous session and the one before that, and it never got past some of the committees. I think that the folks on the various committees that it go to before it goes to a vote just are you know, it's jobs and business, and I
So
understand. Maybe Mike has.
So the projects are, but these aren't union jobs. So the unions aren't a factor there, right?
The unions the unions are all in favor of the warehouses because they're union construction jobs.
Oh,
The-
the construction
The
jobs.
construction, so
Okay.
that's a big piece of the union. And yeah, the warehouse workers are not organized. There are jobs that come
Right.
with them, you know, there's, yeah, depending on the square footage of the warehouse and whether it's robotic or not, there's a lot of jobs that come with them. They're not good jobs, they're horrible jobs, most of them. But yeah, I'll let Mike weigh in. I see his hand up.
Well, let me,
ahead,
once
yeah.
you mentioned, as far as, whether these are good jobs or not good jobs, I think, the people in cities who have supported warehouses in the past because of jobs are now recognizing that many of those are part-time jobs or
Mhm,
seasonal jobs or
mhm,
jobs that may be replaced by automation.
mhm,
So they aren't great job producers.
mhm.
So,
Exactly.
that could be another reason why I see the support dwindling in cities. Although, like I say, the counties still seem to be going ahead.
The cities continue. Just today, I was working with an attorney on letters on environmental impact reports on two warehouses in Banning, right next to each other, that 1.2 million square feet and 1.4 million square foot warehouses right next to each other in
Uh-huh.
Banning. And
Uh-huh.
also on a 5 million square foot project in Beaumont that we've already sued on. The cities, depending on the city, they're not, a very small number of the cities are turning these projects down because they do bring money. They promise, we'll build a park, we'll do this and that, and we'll have all these jobs. And so, yeah, it's been a really difficult thing to
Yeah.
oppose.
Well, again, that kind of brings me back to the cities in the San Bernardino Valley have seen the tremendous impact, where out in the past, it's more of a newer phenomenon, and so they're beginning to live with it, where the valley has been living with it for a couple decades now.
Yeah, and the Valley cities are still approving them. Fontana's approving them, Ontario's approving them, Harupa Valley. Yeah, the only city I can think of that has slowed it is Eastvale, but they're pretty much, already covered in warehouses. So yeah, it's
Okay.
Mike,
so
Mike
thank
has
you,
his hand up.
Mike. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, just to add, Marianne. So I talked with a member of CEJA today, and I talked with Anna Gonzalez from CCAJ yesterday. They just gave an update on the warehouse working group.
Okay.
So in order for there to be recommendations from, that's the state level group that's working under Juan Carrillo, who's an assembly district member in Palmdale, Lancaster area. I can't remember his district, like 50 or something. Anyway, apparently they don't have unanimity, which they need. And it isn't because the environmental groups and the unions are not agreeing. But they're not the issue. The issue is that no matter what those two groups want, the Chambers of Commerce wants nothing. And so you can't get there is no possibility of unanimity because the three separate groups don't see eye to eye. Like the unions and environmental groups might be able to come to an agreement, but Chambers of Commerce wants nothing. They want no regulations on land use. Yeah.
They just want
Okay,
warehouses.
so why would they need unanimity? It seems to me what they need is compromise.
Well, in order for a recommendation for a unified bill to go forward from the working group, that would be what would be required. So that's my understanding. And so I don't know anything more than that other than what this is all hearsay, but it sounds like it's just going to go back and there's going to be another new bill and it's going to be competing bills and it'll still be the same sort of infighting where the coalition of people who want warehouse, like state guidance on what warehouse setbacks or what disproportionate impacts in environmental justice areas should be allowed to be, will be fighting the chambers of commerce and unions again in order to get anything passed. And so it's hard to see that happening. So we might just need to figure out how to do it at the local level.
Yeah.
I see. So have you testified at the committee meetings up there in the legislature on this issue?
I have not. Marianne
No,
has, right?
No, yeah, they haven't invited us. No, we're not part of they don't have, as far as I know, the only local person is the leader of this out in
Yeah.
Lancaster. Even Anna is not, the CCAJ is not part of it. I mean,
That is the most absurd thing, is that
It
there are
is.
no local
Wow.
folks on the dang
Right.
thing, and it's like,
I mean,
anyway,
Wow.
we've been litigating against warehouses for over 16 years now, and they haven't asked Sierra Club, and CCAEJ has been fighting these, and they're not, I mean, they're sort of connected because of SEHA. They're a part of
Yeah.
SEHA.
we have
But
What is
s-
Saya?
it's California Environmental Justice Alliance.
Yeah, and we have 70% of the warehouses in the
Yeah.
state currently in CEQA.
Right.
So like
Yeah.
in terms of square footage, like it's all us. And so it's
Yeah.
like, why aren't we the ones making the decision for this? I don't know.
Why,
Apparently,
why
yeah.
don't they want the Sierra Club and CCAJ? I mean, that's a grassroots organization.
So are we.
You know, why are they not at the table? That's strange to me.
Yeah, we are a grassroots organization here in the Inland Empire, and we're not at the table, and we've led this for years, even before CCAEJ. was here.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I understand, but I'm just, you know, I
yeah,
think some people may look at Sierra Club as litigious and, you know, not want to, you know, have you at the table.
well,
But
that's what it was.
CCAJ, you know, that grew from the ground up as a grassroots organization right here.
Right.
Um,
And we
so
pushed
yeah,
it.
that's strange to me. So you said what's the name of Carrillo up
Carrillo.
in the Lancaster area?
Yeah.
He runs the working group, but
Yes.
so that would be interesting if a reporter asked him why he has not brought, you know, more environmental groups to the table.
Mhm. Yeah, it would be. I've asked Eloise, and she, you know, she doesn't have a good answer.
Well, is she part of the group?
I don't think so. Is she, Mike? Do you know? I don't think Eloise is on the working group.
So how do you find out who's on the working group?
You could probably either email Carrillo, or we could probably look it up and find out. I can find out who's in the working group from our,
Oh, it's public record?
I would imagine it is, and if it's.
Were they appointed by the speaker, or who appointed them?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Interesting. So now I've turned the tables on you, and I'm asking you guys all the questions.
Yeah.
I would note that we asked to be on the panel.
Yes.
We asked multiple times to be on the panel, and we were told no.
Yes.
So that is, we wanted to be on the panel. We volunteered our
Yeah.
time. We
Yes.
gave
Yeah.
them slides. We told them we would love to be a part of that conversation, and we were not invited.
Well,
Yeah.
Cassie,
Wow.
I love the comment that if a reporter were to ask, well, madam, if a reporter were to ask, maybe
Right.
Eloise Reyes' office could also be of help to
Yeah.
identify
Yes.
folks.
It's her.
Yes, I
Yeah.
imagine. Yeah. Well, let me see what I can find out.
Yeah. I imagine that we could, through Sierra Club California, I'm sure I can find out for you who is on the working group.
Yeah.
Well, you have my email address. If you want to shoot that to me when you find it, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
I will check in with our folks up there, see if I can find that out
Rather
to you.
an interesting local story that, you know, as Mike McCarthy's just mentioned, you know, we have this huge percentage of warehouses, and our local folk are not at the table. That says something. So
Right, which is what perked my ears up as a retired journalist.
right, if a reporter were to ask. So
Right.
anyway,
If.
well, I think that has been just a huge just a very broad and detailed take on our local and state and federal races, Cassie. I really appreciate your time.
Well, of course. And Julianne, we have a couple minutes left, and you had asked me if I would talk about the ballot initiatives.
Yes.
And I said, oh, whoa, that's a lot, you know. So, but I did kind of give them a once over, and I see one that has an environmental focus. If you'd like me to just kind of briefly outline that.
Please.
So that's Prop 4, and it's a $10 billion bond issue to fund climate and environmental projects.
Yes.
It's actually called the Safe Drinking Water, Wildfire Prevention, Drought Preparedness, and Clean Air Bond Act of 2024. So that will be before the voters statewide. And it would do things like replenish groundwater, defend against flooding and wildfires, and protect Californians from extreme deadly heat. The state legislative analyst estimated it would cost the state $650 million a year for the next 30 years, or about doubling the cost of the bond issue. The total, by the time it's paid back in 30 years would be $19 billion. So that will be interesting, to see how the voters go on that one. I think there are a number of environmental groups and localities that support it, and it's opposed by the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. So
Huge. And I think the governor just was talking about last week, if I'm not mistaken. But thank you for that highlight, because that's going to be a gigantic issue. And boy, I got it, circling back to what we were talking about just before we recorded, coming through Sequoia, holy smoke. No pun intended. Just huge impacts of climate. Looking at that both Sequoia and Kings Canyon. So if this issue doesn't go through this year, I'm sure it will come back in another form. Is it just looking at the impact on the forest, on both the coniferous forest and the oak forest? Just, I'm almost speechless, because I haven't been up there for 5 years, and the change is really.
Yeah, it's very disturbing to see that, both climate change and these fires effect on the forest. I spent time in Northern California in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and I was back there after many years away, and I was shocked at how dry everything looked. I mean, the ground was hard pan dry. The redwoods looked stressed. It's scary.
Yeah, it's really noticeable. And I mean, as I mentioned, there are parts of the park that are lush and verdant and gorgeous. July is spring in the Sierras, really, everything in bloom. And then you'll go down the road and it'll be a cinder, this burnt, husks of huge pine trees. And then as you drop down in elevation, there's the blue oak die off due to climate, due to being stressed by heat and drought.
I think the sudden oak death phenomenon is moving southward.
Yeah. This is it's not the fungal sudden oak from the coast. This is more heat and drought from the Sierra foothills, and it's just remarkable. It's like you're going through fall foliage, and it's not fall; it's just dying trees. So
yeah.
So
we're losing our forest, the California live oaks.
Yes, and just to see it after 5 years is really shocking.
Yeah.
But that is moving off of our topic somewhat. Our topic is our camping trail here in the inland, and you have covered it beautifully, and I really appreciate your time, Cassie. And we had talked about a 20-minute trail talk, and here you've given us an hour of your time. We appreciate it.
Well, I'm just sorry that I wasn't able to see you all on Zoom, and thank you for putting up with my phoning it in.
Hey, it's like the radio, right? So
It is. I hope the sound quality isn't too bad.
It's pretty good. So, well, thank you so much, and we hope to have you back again and again, because this is such a helpful thing, I think, for our members to hear about what's going on politically, and things are so heating up, here at Midsummer, surprisingly.
That's right.
To be fully aware of what's going on.
Yeah. Well, anytime, I'm happy to come back.
Thank you. we will take you up on that because this has been hugely valuable. I have learned a lot. And I know our members have too. So thank you very much. And John, thank you as always for your hard work and for being the stable, steady presence that you are, and for recording this. And I think it'll be very helpful for our members.
And I'm on that note, I'm going to push the stop recording because I think